The EU policy towards Russia is weakened by inconsistency and incoherence. This week has shown us yet another example of this problem. 16 members of the European Commission have travelled to Moscow for talks with Russian ministers on a range of issues. What the Russians want to talk about is being able to travel to the EU without needing a visa. The first step in that process is granting a visa exemption to holders of Russian service passports. These are essentially state and regional officials. There are more than 180,000 people in Russia holding service passports. The Kremlin has been lobbying intensively for this step. Until recently, EU member states were divided, but Germany and Luxembourg have now withdrawn their opposition to visa-free travel for Russian officials. No one disputes the importance of facilitating travel. I believe that enabling more Russians to come to the EU would help them to understand more about our free societies and about their own repressive government. But the timing of this dialogue on visas with Russia is astonishing. Why? Because just a few months ago, the European Parliament voted in favor of a recommendation that I authored, calling for the Russian officials involving in the death of Sergei Magnitsky to be banned from entering to the European Union. So we now have a situation which Europe's democratic representatives want to see visa rules for Russian officials tightened, while the Commission and the Member States want to see those rules relaxed. For the Kremlin, this is a big victory, just at a time when it remains under attack for its determination to prosecute Magnitsky, even though he is dead. We now face the prospect of officials involved in Magnitsky's death and other serious human rights abuses being allowed to enter to the EU freely and in many cases to enjoy spending the money they have gained from corruption. The way to resolve this issue would be for the EU member states to agree a Magnitsky law, like one passed by the US Congress. This would ensure that certain individuals involved in corruption and violation of human rights are prevented from entering to the EU. In fact, we should insist that any progress towards visa-free travel for Russian officials should be accompanied by the steps towards an EU Magnitsky law. Of course, not all Russian officials deserve to be excluded from travel, but if the EU wants to regain its credibility with Russia and rebalance the relationship, it needs to add backbone to its approach. Nothing would hurt Kremlin more than an EU Magnitsky law.